Hello and welcome back to La Crime Noire. And before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you're drawn to dark, haunting stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now settle in, clear your mind, let the outside world slip away, and let's begin. Story 1. It was early January when everything happened. The kind of winter that didn't just make you cold, but made you feel like the cold was alive, slowly creeping into your body and settling deep inside your bones. Every time I stepped outside, it felt like the air itself was trying to freeze me from the inside out. Even breathing hurt. The cold wasn't just uncomfortable. It was unbearable. I couldn't understand how anyone would willingly go outside in weather like that. That's why, when I saw her standing out there, I couldn't ignore it. It was a Thursday night. I had nothing planned, and honestly, I didn't feel like doing anything. I ordered a pizza, turned on the TV, and stretched out on my couch. It was one of those quiet nights where everything feels slow and dull. Behind me, the window had fogged up from the warmth inside. Without thinking much about it, I leaned back and started drawing on the glass with my finger. Something I used to do all the time when I was a kid. I traced a small sun, just a simple circle with lines around it. As I moved my hand across the glass, clearing some of the fog, I noticed something outside. At first, I thought it was just a shadow or a trick of the light. But then I looked closer. There was someone standing on the sidewalk. A woman. She wasn't moving. Not even a little. She wore a thick parka, and the hood was pulled so far over her face that I couldn't see any part of her features. I wiped more of the fog away with my hand, trying to get a clearer look. Still nothing. She didn't react, didn't shift her weight, didn't even seem to breathe. She just stood there, completely still, like she had been placed there. I know it sounds strange just staring at someone like that, but she was outside my house. She wasn't leaving. And for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that she had been watching me first. My phone was sitting right next to me. I grabbed it quickly and called my best friend, Matt. The phone rang, each second feeling longer than it should have. I kept glancing between the screen and the window, my heart beating faster for no clear reason. "Come on, man. Pick up," I muttered under my breath. A cold feeling crawled up my spine, slow and heavy, like something was pressing against me from behind. It didn't go away. The call went to voicemail. "Sorry, but the number you're calling is currently unavailable." I let out a quiet breath and lowered the phone. I almost cursed, but stopped myself. I was overreacting. It was just a girl standing outside. She wasn't doing anything. There was no reason to be scared. Still, that cold feeling stayed. I took a deep breath, turned my head back toward the window. She was gone. Just like that. No movement, no sound, nothing. One second she was there, the next she wasn't. I leaned forward, squinting, trying to see where she could have gone. The snow outside was untouched. No footprints, no signs that anyone had been standing there at all. It didn't make sense. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. Still nothing. The street was empty, silent, like it had been the whole time. I leaned back against the couch, staring up at the ceiling, trying to calm myself down. "It was just your imagination," I whispered. "Yeah, just your imagination." I repeated it a few times, hoping if I said it enough, it would start to feel true. Then someone knocked on the door. I jumped up so fast I almost lost my balance. My heart started racing again, louder this time. But I quickly tried to think logically. It had to be the pizza. I walked downstairs toward the front door. The house felt colder now, quieter than before. As I reached for the doorknob, my hand stopped just inches away. Something didn't feel right. I don't know why, but instead of opening the door, I leaned in and looked through the peephole. She was there, standing right outside my door. I stumbled back, catching myself against the wall. My chest tightened, and that same cold feeling rushed through me again, stronger this time. I stepped closer to the door, pressing my hand and forehead against it, trying to steady myself. I didn't want to look again, but I couldn't move away either. She knocked. The sound echoed through the house, slow and heavy. I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, like the air had been pulled out of it. She knocked again. A faint, icy mist seemed to slip through the edges of the door, spreading across the floor. The temperature in the hallway dropped quickly. I could feel the cold reaching me, wrapping around my legs, climbing upward. She kept knocking. Focus, I told myself. It's just a person. She can't do anything to you. I forced myself to stand straight, even though every part of me wanted to stay frozen. I grabbed a jacket, pulled it on, and reached for the handle. Then I opened the door. The night outside was dark, the sky filled with faint stars. Clouds drifted slowly across the moon, and the snow covered everything in a smooth white layer. Tall trees stood in the distance, their branches heavy with ice. But she wasn't there. No one was. I stepped outside, my breath instantly turning into frost. I looked left, then right, searching for any sign of her. Just like before, there was nothing. No footprints, no marks in the snow. It was as if she had never been there at all. I leaned back against the door, pressing my hands against my face. None of this made sense. At that point, I started to seriously wonder if I was losing my mind. It was the only explanation that seemed possible. After a moment, I forced myself to move again. I walked to the edge of the porch and rested my hands on the cold metal railing. The snow stretched out in every direction, quiet and untouched. That's when I saw it. An arrow. It had been carved into the snow, pointing away from the house. I froze, staring at it. How had I not noticed it before? I don't know why I didn't just go back inside. Looking back now, that would have been the smart thing to do. But something about it pulled me in. It felt like the arrow was meant for me, like it was calling me forward. Maybe it was just curiosity. Maybe it was something else. Either way, I followed it. I locked the door behind me and stepped off the porch, my boots crunching against the snow. As I walked around the side of the house, I found another arrow, then another, each one leading me further along. They led me to the backyard, then further, toward the forest. I stopped at the edge, staring into the dark trees. My hands were already starting to go numb from the cold. Am I really doing this? I muttered to myself. Am I seriously about to walk into the forest in the middle of the night? The wind picked up, howling softly through the trees. It almost sounded like it was calling me, so I went in. The forest was quiet, but not peaceful. The tall trees surrounded me, their branches heavy with snow that occasionally slipped off and fell to the ground with soft thuds. The moon broke through the clouds just enough to light the path ahead. More arrows, always another one, just a few steps ahead. The deeper I went, the colder it became. The air felt sharper, harder to breathe. But at the same time, the wind felt different, softer, like it was guiding me instead of pushing me away. I kept walking. Sometimes I hesitated. Sometimes I almost turned back. But every time I did, something changed. The wind would grow louder, the shadows would stretch, the light would fade. And somewhere in the distance, I thought I could hear her, calling me. So I kept going. Eventually, I reached a small clearing. There was a mark in the snow, an X. I stepped closer and slowly knelt down. My breath came out in heavy clouds, my hands shaking from the cold. The wind circled around me, quiet but insistent. It felt like it wanted me to dig, like she wanted me to dig. Without thinking any further, I dropped to my knees and started digging into the snow with my bare hands. The cold bit into my skin immediately, sharp and painful, but I didn't stop. I kept digging. The snow grew deeper. My fingers started to lose feeling. My breathing became uneven. Still, I kept going. I didn't know how long it took. Minutes, maybe longer. Time didn't feel real anymore. Then I saw something. A face. I brushed away the remaining snow, revealing her completely. She was frozen. Her skin was pale, almost blue. Her eyes were open, but empty. The pupils faded into a dull white. Thin lines of dark blue spread across her skin like veins frozen in place. Frost covered her fingers and dried blood stained her lips. She had been here the whole time, waiting. And somehow I knew. This was her. Story 2. Dead bodies stopped bothering me around the 4th or 5th one I saw. After that, they all started to feel the same. Just bodies. Just people who used to be alive and now weren't. I had to touch them, move them, check them. But I stopped thinking about who they were. They didn't have names anymore. Not to me. I've seen all kinds of deaths. People hit by cars, people dropping from heart attacks, overdoses. Things you don't even want to imagine. And yeah, I'll admit it, sometimes I made jokes about it. Dark humor, the kind you use to deal with things you probably shouldn't have to deal with. I know how that sounds. I know what it makes me. An asshole. Lately, I've been thinking maybe I deserved what happened to me. This all started about a week ago. We got called in for a welfare check. Nothing unusual. A neighbor hadn't been seen in a few days, and someone got worried. It happens all the time. Most of the time, it ends exactly how you expect. When we got there, I was the one who stepped up to force the door open. That's when I missed the first sign that something wasn't right. The welcome mat at the front door had a cheerful message on it. Something like wishing that anyone who entered would leave as a friend. It felt normal, almost comforting. But the door frame around it told a completely different story. Someone had carved strange symbols into the wood. They looked sharp, messy, and aggressive, like they were meant to warn people away. I noticed them, but I ignored them. I shouldn't have. I forced the door open anyway. The wood cracked loudly as it gave way, and the door slowly swung inward with a long, creaking sound. It almost felt like the house itself was asking me if I was sure I wanted to come inside. I stepped in. The living room was completely dark. The windows had been covered with old newspapers, blocking out any light from outside. I turned on my flashlight and moved it across the room. That's when I saw the bones. Animal bones were hanging from the ceiling, tied together with string. They swayed slightly as I walked in. Along the walls, small animal bodies had been nailed in place, arranged in strange triangular patterns. Everything about it felt wrong. "What the hell is this?" I said, turning back toward the others. Andrew, the new guy, leaned in just enough to look inside before immediately pulling back. He shook his head and said there were no way he was going in there. He compared it to something out of a horror movie. I shrugged it off, trying to act like it didn't bother me. I made a joke about the place having terrible decoration and stepped further inside. That's when I smelled it. Death has a very specific smell. Once you know it, you never forget it. It's heavy, thick, and it sticks in your throat. I covered my nose slightly and pushed deeper into the house. Something crunched under my boots, and I decided not to look down too closely. I called out, announcing we were there, hoping maybe someone alive would answer. No one did. As I moved through the house, I tried not to focus on the symbols painted across the walls. They were dark red, smeared and uneven. They looked like they had been made in a hurry, or maybe with shaking hands. I reached the kitchen and pushed aside a hanging curtain made of bones. They clinked softly as I moved through them. That's when I saw her. An old woman was lying on the table. Her arms and legs were pinned down with large kitchen knives, one through each limb. Her skin was covered in the same strange symbols I had seen on the walls. Parts of her body were badly decomposed, but the areas where the symbols were carved looked untouched. There were candles around her, melted down completely, cold and dead. Her mouth had been forced open and filled with what looked like small animal bones. The ends of them were burned. It was one of the worst things I had ever seen. And what did I say? I made a joke. I said something stupid, something disrespectful. I laughed. Looking back now, I wish I hadn't opened my mouth at all. I don't know what I disturbed in that house, but I'm sure that's the moment it started. Not long after, the police showed up and took over the scene. They blocked everything off, started their investigation, and sent us back to the station. Our job was done. There's an old superstition in our line of work. When you leave a place where someone has died, you wipe your feet on the doormat before you go. It's supposed to stop anything from following you. I never believed in it. I didn't wipe my feet. I really wish I had. When we got back to the station, things felt normal at first. I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth before heading to bed. I was standing there, half awake, staring at my reflection when something caught my eye. Behind me in the mirror, I saw those same red symbols on the wall. I turned around quickly. The wall was completely normal. Nothing there. I told myself I was just tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. I turned back toward the mirror. Before I could even process what I was seeing, the mirror suddenly fell off the wall and shattered on the floor. I jumped back, swearing loudly. One of my co-workers called out, asking if I was okay. I told her it was nothing, just the mirror falling. I grabbed a broom and started cleaning up the broken glass. I was trying to be careful, making sure I didn't leave any pieces behind. That's when I noticed one of the larger shards. I picked it up and looked into it. The old woman was there. She was lying on the table exactly like she had been in the house. I turned the glass away, then back again. She was still there. No matter how I moved it, she didn't disappear. Then suddenly, her head snapped toward me. Her eyes locked onto mine. Before I could react, she started pulling herself free. One arm then the other. Her legs followed, the knives sliding out without a sound. She dropped off the table and hit the floor face first. But she didn't get up. She started dragging herself forward, her face scraping against the ground as she moved. Slowly, steadily, she crawled out of view. For a second, the shard showed nothing again. Then she came back. Her face slammed into the glass from the other side, like she was trying to break through. I panicked and dropped the shard. It shattered into smaller pieces across the floor. Every single piece reflected her face. Her eyes followed me. I backed away, pressing myself against the wall, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would explode. I ran out of the bathroom and into the kitchen. My hand was bleeding from where the glass had cut me, but I barely noticed it. I washed it under the faucet and wrapped it up, but my mind was somewhere else. I couldn't stop thinking about her. That night I went to bed but couldn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, completely frozen. I didn't feel safe, even surrounded by people. After a while, I heard something. A wet, heavy sound hit the window, then a voice. It was broken, choking, barely understandable. But I knew what it said. It said it found me. I wanted to move. I wanted to run, to wake everyone up, to do anything. But I couldn't. My body wouldn't respond. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Eventually, I heard the door to the room open. And then the smell hit me. That same smell. Death. I started crying without even realizing it. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I just lay there as I heard something walking toward me. Slow, wet footsteps. They stopped right next to my bed. I whispered for help, barely able to make a sound. Then she leaned over me. Her face was right above mine. Her mouth still full of bones, her empty eyes staring straight into me. She smiled, if you could even call it that. Then she drove something sharp into my hand, right where I had been cut earlier, pinning it down to the bed. That's when I finally screamed. The lights came on. Everyone woke up. My coworker rushed over, asking what was wrong. I sat up, holding my hand, looking around for her. She was gone. They told me it was just a nightmare, that I had scared everyone. Eventually, they went back to sleep, but I didn't. That was a week ago. I haven't gone back to work since. Nothing strange has happened at home. No sounds, no shadows, nothing like that. But my hand hasn't healed. Not even a little. I'm supposed to go back tomorrow, and I'm scared. I don't know what followed me. I don't know what I brought back with me, but I know one thing. It's not done with me yet. If anyone has ever experienced something like this, or knows what I should do, please tell me. I don't think I can go back there alone. Story 3. Growing up in a small town in Eastern Europe, we were surrounded by stories. They weren't just told for fun. They were meant to keep us safe. At least that's what the adults always said. When we were younger, those stories used to scare us. Creatures hiding in the dark, things watching from the woods, something waiting if we stepped out of line. But as we got older, most of us stopped believing in them. We started to see them for what we thought they really were. Simple tricks to make children behave. If you didn't zip your bag properly, something would sneak in and steal your things. If you didn't finish your food, animals would come to your house at night. It all sounded silly once you thought about it. But there was one kind of story that always felt different. Those were the ones about the town itself. Every version of those stories carried the same warning. Never walk alone. Never wander too far. And most importantly, never let yourself be alone on the streets, especially when the weather turned bad. Back then, I didn't take those warnings seriously. I should have. It happened in early December, the kind of cold that made your face hurt and your fingers go numb even through thick gloves. I was walking home from school with my younger sister, Lena. The wind cut through our oversized jackets, slipping in through every gap it could find. Above us, heavy clouds blocked out the sky, turning everything dull and gray. It was obvious a storm was coming. We didn't think much of it. Winters like that were normal for us. So we kept walking, following the narrow path that ran between the houses in our neighborhood. Eventually, we stepped out onto the final stretch that led toward our home. On one side, there were rows of small, old houses. Most of them had faint light coming from inside, the kind that made you think of weak fires and quiet evenings. On the other side, there was nothing but open land and a line of birch trees. The first rows had been cut down long ago, leaving only pale stumps sticking out of the ground. Between the houses and the trees, there were small squares of farmland. I had never seen anything grow there. No animals, no crops, just empty land. I remembered the stories then. The warnings about staying focused, about not looking too far into the woods. Without saying anything, Lena and I both kept our eyes down and walked a little faster. After a few moments, I glanced back to make sure she was still behind me. She wasn't moving. She stood a few steps back, completely still, staring toward the trees. I followed her gaze, looking across the empty field and into the line of birch trees. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just the pale trunks and thin branches, swaying slightly in the wind. I called her name, but she didn't respond. Something about the way she stood there made me uneasy. I didn't like it. So I walked back, grabbed her by the hood of her jacket, and pulled her along with me. She didn't resist, but she didn't look away either. Her eyes stayed fixed on the trees. As I turned to keep moving, my foot slipped on a patch of frozen ground hidden beneath a thin layer of frost. I fell hard onto my back. That seemed to snap her out of it. She laughed like nothing had happened and ran ahead toward home. I got up, brushing the snow off my clothes, and ran after her. By the time we reached our gate, something didn't feel right. I don't know how to explain it exactly. It was just a feeling deep in my stomach. Something telling me to look back. At first, I ignored it. But the feeling didn't go away. It got stronger, heavier, like it wouldn't let me go until I turned around. So I did. I looked back at the trees. My eyes moved from one trunk to the next, scanning the line slowly. But there was nothing there. Just the same pale shapes, standing still in the cold. Still, the feeling stayed with me. That night, after dinner, I went to my room and reached into my school bag. That's when I realized I was missing 2 books. I thought back to the walk home and remembered falling. They must have slipped out then. I cursed myself for not closing my bag properly. Without thinking much about it, I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. My mother asked where I was going, but I didn't stop to explain. I just told her I'd be back soon and stepped outside. The snow had already started falling. It must have only been for a short time, but it was coming down fast. I knew the chances of finding my books were low, but I still tried. I walked back the way we came, kicking through the snow, my hands buried deep in my pockets to keep them warm. The wind made it harder to see, and everything looked the same under the fresh layer of white. I kept my head down, watching where I stepped. Then that feeling came back. This time, I didn't ignore it. I turned immediately, looking toward the trees again. The wind was stronger now, making the branches sway back and forth. They moved together, bending with the storm. All except one. One shape stood completely still. At first, I thought it was just another tree, but something about it felt wrong. It was too thin, too uneven. Its shape didn't match the others. I stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. For a moment, it looked like it had arms, long, thin branches spreading out like hands. And then, I swear, it moved. It looked like it waved at me. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. It was still there, but it wasn't moving like the rest. It stood out in a way I couldn't explain. I told myself I was imagining things. I tried to focus on finding my books, but I couldn't stop looking back at it. Every few seconds, my eyes drifted toward that shape again. Eventually, I stopped walking completely. I just stood there, staring at it. The snow was falling harder now, and it was getting difficult to see anything clearly. The cold was biting into my hands and face. I knew I couldn't stay out there much longer. So I gave up on the books and turned back toward home. The wind pushed against me as I walked, slowing me down. I stayed close to the houses, using the walls and fences to guide me. My feet dragged through the deepening snow, but that feeling didn't leave. It stayed with me. Then I heard something, a voice. It came through the wind, soft but clear enough to understand. It sounded familiar, warm, almost comforting. Without thinking, I turned toward it. I stepped away from the houses, following the sound. One step, then another, then a third, and then I saw it. It stood a short distance away, just barely visible through the snow. At first, it looked like a person. Someone standing there, waiting, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw the truth. It wasn't a person. It was that same shape from the trees, only now it was closer. Its long limbs stretched outward, reaching toward me, and this time, it was moving, slow, uneven steps like it was learning how to walk. The voice was still there, still calling to me, but now I could hear something else underneath it. Something broken. I couldn't move at first. My body felt frozen, not just from the cold, but from fear. Then something inside me snapped. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see it any closer. I could hear it behind me, moving through the snow faster than it should have been. My feet slipped and stumbled, barely keeping me upright. I knew if I fell, it would catch me. Then I saw the light. Our house. The porch light was on, and I could see figures standing there. My parents were calling my name, their voices cutting through the storm. I ran toward them with everything I had left. Behind me, the voice changed. It wasn't soft anymore. It screamed. A horrible, broken sound that didn't belong to anything human. I reached the gate, pushed through it, and stumbled toward the door. My parents grabbed me and pulled me inside. I collapsed on the floor, shaking, trying to breathe. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. The next day, I didn't go to school. I stayed home while my sister left with our mother. My father didn't say much, but I could see the worry on his face. Later, My grandparents came over. Not long after that, a group of men from the town gathered outside. Each of them carried tools, axes. They walked toward the tree line. No one explained anything to me. But over the next few days, I noticed something. The line of trees had moved back. More stumps appeared where the forest used to be. No one talked about it, and I didn't ask. As I got older, I started to understand. Those stories weren't just stories. Now I tell them to my own children, exactly the way they were told to me. I make sure they understand one thing above all else: never walk alone. Sometimes on stormy days, I catch myself looking out the window, watching the path that leads past our house, counting the seconds, hoping no one looks too far into the trees. Because out there, beyond those pale stumps and silent fields, something is still waiting. And I don't think it ever left. Story 4. McKinney was where the spiders were. In the backyard, there was a hole where a tree had once stood. It wasn't just a normal hole. It was deep, rotting, and carved into the dry Texas dirt like something had been taken out of it and never replaced. Inside that hollow, there was a mass of spiders. Not just a few, a pile of them. They were packed together so tightly that the ground itself looked alive, like it was breathing. Dark bodies, thin legs, all shifting and crawling over each other in a slow, constant movement. If you stared too long, it felt like the earth was moving under your feet. I avoided that part of the yard whenever I could. I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to think about what lived in that hole, or why there were so many of them gathered in one place like that. It felt wrong, like the ground was hiding something heavy and alive beneath it. But even staying inside didn't make things feel safe. It felt like whatever was wrong out there had followed us into the house, like it had settled into the walls, into the floors, into the air itself. The house never felt still. It felt restless. Things would happen at random. Objects would fall off the walls without anyone touching them, like they had been pushed. Lights would flicker even when no one was near the switches. Sometimes you could walk into a room and suddenly feel a patch of air so cold it didn't make sense, especially in the middle of a Texas summer. It wasn't constant, but it happened enough that we all noticed. After a while, I started to see a pattern. The strange things happened more when there was tension in the house, when my mom was stressed or overwhelmed, when we, the kids, were fighting or crying. It was like the house reacted to it. But my dad didn't see it that way. He didn't think the house was haunted. He thought it was my mom. Every time something strange happened, he blamed her. He said it was because of her beliefs, her habits, things she practiced that he didn't trust or understand. That was the kind of environment we were living in. And that's when the nightmares started. At first, they were just strange dreams. Nothing too clear, nothing too real. But then they changed. Every time, it started the same way. I would hear the sound of a music box, a soft, mechanical winding sound, like something being slowly turned again and again. It didn't feel like it was outside. It felt like it was inside my head, playing quietly while I slept. And somehow I knew what it meant. It meant he was coming. He didn't come through the door. He came through the window. Not like a normal person. He didn't climb or open anything. He unfolded himself through the window, like his body didn't follow normal rules. long limbs thin and unnatural, stretching into the room piece by piece. He looked like a man, but wrong in every way. His arms and legs were too long. His fingers looked like dry sticks, bending in ways they shouldn't. And on his head, he wore a tall hat that made his shape even more unnatural. He moved slowly, but not like a person walking. It was more like a shadow stretching across a wall, silent, deliberate. He would climb onto the bed, and I would feel it. The mattress would sink under his weight. Then he would start at my feet. He didn't bite. He didn't attack like anything normal. He would open his mouth, and his throat would stretch, widening in a way that didn't seem possible. Then he would begin to pull me in, slowly swallowing me whole. It felt like being trapped inside something tight and dry, like being pulled into a space where there was no air. I could feel the pressure around my legs, then my waist, then my chest. It was slow, suffocating, and I couldn't escape it. I would try to scream, try to move, but nothing worked. And just when it felt like I couldn't breathe anymore, I would wake up, every time, covered in sweat, shaken, my heart racing, but still feeling that pressure on my body like it hadn't fully gone away. For a while, it stayed in my dreams. Then one day it didn't. It was the middle of the afternoon. The sun was high and the house was quiet. My mom had us all lie down for a nap. The blinds were closed, but sunlight still pushed through, creating thin lines of light across the room. We were all on the bed together, settling down. That's when something moved across the window. At first, it was just a shadow, but it didn't move like something outside passing by. It was slow, controlled. It slid across the blinds and then stopped right in the center. It was a shape, a person-shaped shadow, and on its head was a tall hat. It stood there, perfectly still, its outline clear against the light coming through the blinds. It didn't move, didn't shift. It just stayed there, like it was watching us. The moment I saw it, I knew. It was him. The same thing from my dreams. I started screaming. I pointed at the window, my voice shaking as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. My siblings looked too, and they started crying. They could see it. That made it worse. My mom looked from us to the window, confused at first. But then her expression changed. She realized we were all looking at the same thing. She saw it too. Not just the shape, but the feeling. The cold, heavy presence in the room. She didn't hesitate. She shouted at it to leave and rushed over to the window, pulling the blinds open. There was nothing there. The yard outside was empty, bright under the sun. But the fear didn't go away. That night, my mom did something different. She walked through the house with incense, letting the smoke fill the rooms, especially the corners where shadows gathered. Then she placed lines of salt along every door and window. I remember watching her from my room as she went outside and circled the house, laying salt along the ground. She was trying to protect us. After that, things changed. The house felt quieter. The strange activities stopped happening as often. Things stayed where they were. The cold spots disappeared. And the nightmares, they started to fade. The sound of the music box stopped. The dreams became less frequent, until eventually, they were gone. Looking back now, I understand more than I did back then. I see my mom differently. She wasn't the cause of what was happening. She was the one standing between us and something we didn't understand. My dad thought she was the problem. He blamed her for everything strange that happened. But she was the one trying to keep it out. The last time I ever saw him in a dream, it was different. He wasn't in the room. He was outside, standing on the other side of the window. I watched him from my bed, barely moving, barely breathing. His face was pressed against the glass, hard enough that it looked distorted. His mouth was wide open, frozen in a silent scream. His eyes were empty, but focused. This time he wasn't calm. He was desperate. His hands clawed at the window, long fingers scraping against the glass in the frame. The sound was sharp and horrible, like something hard dragging across wood. He was trying to get in, but he couldn't. Something was stopping him. The salt, the smoke, whatever my mom had done, it worked. He kept scratching, faster, more frantic, trying to find a way through, but there was nothing for him to grab onto. No opening, no invitation. Eventually he stopped, and then he was gone. I haven't seen him since. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I hear it. That soft, mechanical winding sound. Just for a second. And every time I do, I look at the window. Story 5. I'm not even sure this is the right place to share this. But I've seen other people talk about strange things happening after the flood. So maybe someone here will understand what I'm trying to explain. This isn't really about the flood itself. It's about what I found when I went back. I used to live in a small apartment building near the lower part of the city. It wasn't anything special. Just 2 floors, a narrow staircase, and thin walls that made it impossible not to hear your neighbors arguing. It felt normal back then. It felt like home. We left when the water started rising. I was around 12 at the time. I remember the panic, the way everything suddenly became urgent. We packed what we could and left, thinking we might come back in a few days. We never did. The area stayed underwater for months. And even after the water went down, most people didn't return. Some said it was because of the damage. Others said it just didn't feel right anymore. Too many memories, maybe. Or something else no one really wanted to talk about. Last week I went back. I told myself it was just to see what was left. Maybe find something we had forgotten. Something small, something personal. But if I'm being honest, that wasn't really the reason. I think I just wanted to see if the place still felt like mine. It didn't. The building was still standing, but just barely. The walls were stained halfway up from where the water had reached. The front door was slightly open, hanging at an angle, like it had been left that way for a long time. There was no one around. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Even abandoned places usually have some kind of life to them. A distant sound, movement, something. But this place was completely still. No wind, no animals, nothing. I should have turned back then. But I didn't. I stepped inside. The smell wasn't as bad as I expected. It was just damp, like something that had been wet for too long and never fully dried. The air felt heavy, like it had been sitting there, untouched. The staircase was still there, exactly where it used to be. And when I stepped on the 3rd step, it creaked, the same way it always had. That sound shouldn't have mattered. It was just a loose step. But hearing it again, after all this time, made something tighten in my chest. It felt like nothing had really changed. And that was worse than if everything had been destroyed. I moved slowly up the stairs and stopped in front of my old apartment. The door was closed. That didn't make sense. When we lived there, the lock barely worked. The door was always slightly open, or at least loose. Seeing it fully shut felt wrong, like someone had made sure of it. I stood there for a moment, just listening. Nothing, no movement, no sound. Finally, I reached out and pushed the door open. Inside, everything felt off. Not broken, not clean either. Just wrong. The furniture was still there, but it wasn't where I remembered it. It looked like someone had moved things around slightly. Not enough to rearrange the room, but enough to make it feel unfamiliar. Like someone had been there, but didn't really live there. The air inside was colder than outside, and the silence felt heavier. I walked further in, my steps slow, careful. Every part of me felt tense, like I was waiting for something to happen. When I reached my old room, I stopped. The wall caught my attention immediately. There were scratches all over it, thin, uneven lines carved into the surface again and again. At first, I thought it was just damage from the flood. Water can do strange things. But when I stepped closer, I realized something wasn't right. The scratches weren't random. They followed a pattern. Not a clean one, not something easy to read, but intentional. Like someone had been trying to write something over and over, failing each time. That's when I heard it. A sound from upstairs. It wasn't loud. Just a soft dragging noise, like something being pulled slowly across the floor. I froze. For a second, I thought it might just be the building settling. Old places make noise. Then it happened again. This time, directly above me. I called out, asking if anyone was there. No answer. The silence came back, heavier than before. I stepped back into the hallway and looked toward the staircase. It seemed darker than it should have been, like the light from outside wasn't reaching it properly. I knew I should leave. Everything in me was telling me to leave. But I didn't. I walked toward the stairs. Each step felt too loud, echoing in the quiet building. And when I stepped on that same loose step, it creaked again. The exact same sound. Something about that made my skin crawl. I reached the top and saw the door. There was only one room up there. I didn't remember who used it when we lived there. But I knew one thing. It was always locked. Now it was slightly open, just enough to see darkness inside. I didn't touch it. I just stood there listening. That's when I heard the breathing, slow, quiet. Like someone was trying not to be heard. I stepped back immediately. And that's when the door moved, not fully opening, not closing, just shifting slightly. Like something behind it had adjusted its weight. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then I heard something else. A voice. At first it didn't form words. It was just a sound, broken and uneven, like someone struggling to speak after a long time. Then it said something clearly. My name. I didn't wait. I turned and ran. I went down the stairs as fast as I could, nearly slipping. I didn't stop until I was outside, back on the main road, far away from the building. Even then, I didn't feel safe. I kept telling myself there had to be a normal explanation. Someone living there. Someone hiding. Someone who heard me and decided to mess with me. But there's one thing I can't explain. When I got home, I checked my phone. I don't remember taking it out while I was inside. But there was a photo. Just one. It was taken in my old room. It showed the wall with the scratches. And in the photo, they weren't messy or unclear. They were sharp, easy to read. They formed words. I remember you. I haven't gone back since, and I don't think I ever will. But I keep thinking about something. The way the building felt, the silence, the breathing, the voice. It didn't feel like I had just walked into an abandoned place. It felt like I had walked into something that hadn't left, something that stayed, something that knew I would come back. And I can't stop wondering if it's still there, waiting. Story 6. The soothe howls 3 times. The first howl means it has found you. The second means it's close. The third is supposed to kill you. That's what the stories say. Not with teeth or claws, but with fear alone. People say the sound is so terrifying that your heart just stops. There are a lot of stories about creatures that bring death, but this one is different. It doesn't always kill. Sometimes it takes you somewhere else, somewhere you're not meant to go. I don't know which is worse. I'm telling this because I experienced it, and I need someone to hear it. When I was a child, my grandmother used to tell me stories about the Fae, not as entertainment, but as warnings. She would talk about creatures that lived in the hills, the water, the forests, things that looked beautiful but weren't, things that tricked people, took them, replaced them. She used to warn me to stay away from certain places, the shore especially. She would repeat it again and again, telling me not to go near the water, not to trust what I saw there. When I started to grow into myself and told her I didn't see myself the way others expected, she didn't understand. She said the Fae must have taken her grandchild and replaced me with something else. It hurt back then. It really did. But as time passed, I learned to hold on to the good parts of her. The warmth, the care behind those stories, even if I didn't understand it at the time. Those stories stayed with me. I grew up, but I never really left that place behind. I stayed close to home, to the land, to the memory of where I came from. I built a small cabin for myself, away from everything. I grew my own food, lived quietly. It was simple, peaceful. I got used to the silence, the wind through the trees, the distant call of birds, the stillness of the land. It became a part of me. Then one night, everything changed. I was walking near a lock not far from my cabin. The water was completely still like glass, reflecting the sky so clearly it looked unreal. The stars and the moon sat perfectly on its surface. Then I heard it. A howl. It was so loud it felt like it shook the air around me. It didn't sound like any animal I had ever heard. It was deeper, heavier, like something much larger than it should have been. It broke the silence instantly. I froze, listening. For a moment, I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that maybe I imagined it. When you live alone long enough, your mind can start playing tricks on you. But then I saw the water. Ripples spread across the surface of the lock. There was no wind. Nothing had touched it. Something was out there. I looked toward the other side, and every story my grandmother had ever told me came rushing back all at once. Creatures in the water, creatures in the trees, things that watched from a distance, and then I saw it. A shape, large, moving, too large to be anything normal. That's when I knew. The soothe. My grandmother used to speak about it differently than the others, more serious, more careful. She used to say that when you hear the first howl, you still have time. You run. You go home. You lock your door. You protect yourself as best as you can. I didn't think. I just ran. Before I even realized what I was doing, my body was already moving. My legs carried me away from the lock, back toward my cabin. Then I heard it again, the second howl, closer, stronger. It felt like it was inside me, not just around me, like it was shaking my body from the inside. I looked back. I wish I hadn't. It was already there, crossing the distance faster than anything should have been able to. Its fur looked dark, almost green, heavy and tangled. Its body was massive, larger than any animal I'd ever seen, and it made no sound. That was the worst part. It moved through the grass, but there was no noise, no footsteps, no breathing, just silence. A hunter that didn't need to announce itself. I ran faster. My legs burned. My lungs ached. But I didn't stop. I could see my cabin ahead, the faint light from my fire still glowing. It felt like safety, like I just had to make it there. I was so close. Then I heard the third howl. Everything in me froze. My heart stuttered. My breath caught. My body felt like it should have stopped right there. But I didn't die. I was still standing. For a moment, I didn't understand. Then I heard something else. A growl. Low, close, real. Before I could react, something grabbed my leg. Pain exploded through me as teeth sank into my calf. I screamed, collapsing as it dragged me backward. My face hit the ground hard, dirt filling my mouth. I couldn't see anything clearly. Everything blurred together as I was pulled across the ground. I could hear it breathing now, heavy, real. Then suddenly, everything changed. Water. Cold, overwhelming water. It covered me completely, filled my lungs, burned as I tried to breathe. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't think. I thought I was going to die. Then everything disappeared. Not darkness, not silence, nothing. I didn't understand it at first. There was no sight, no sound, no feeling. It wasn't empty. It was the absence of everything. Then slowly something returned. Warmth, sound, light. I opened my eyes. I wasn't in the lock anymore. I was somewhere else. It looked like a swamp, but not a normal one. The colors were wrong. The trees had leaves that weren't green. The ground didn't look natural. The water moved in ways it shouldn't. Everything felt off. Then I saw them. Figures sitting on large stone seats arranged like a court. They looked human, but perfect in a way that didn't feel real. Their skin, their hair, their presence, it was too much, too complete. They were watching me. One of them spoke. The voice didn't just come from one place. It was everywhere at once. Inside my head, around me, through me. It asked for my name. I remembered my grandmother's warnings. Never give your name. I refused. Instead, I gave a different one. A name I didn't use anymore. One tied to my past. The moment I said it, I knew it wasn't enough. They knew. They spoke about it like it was a game. Like they were testing me. Every word I said felt dangerous. Like one mistake would cost me everything. They asked questions, offered things, tried to twist my answers. I was careful. I didn't accept anything. I didn't agree to anything. I didn't fully understand. Eventually, they offered me a way out. But it came with a condition. I could leave. But I could never return to my home. Never step foot on that land again. I agreed. I didn't have a choice. Something changed immediately. The world around me cracked open like a doorway forming in the air. I stepped toward it. Then they asked one last question. They asked for my word. I started to answer. And in that moment, I felt something being taken from me. I didn't understand it at first. Not until I tried to speak again. Nothing came out. I was back. standing outside my cabin. But everything was different. The land looked older. The air felt heavier. And when I checked my phone, I saw the date. Years had passed. I had been gone for minutes. Now I'm here, but not the same. I can't speak. I know things I shouldn't know. I can feel what's out there. Creatures in the water, in the trees, in the dark. And I know they're watching. I didn't escape because I was stronger. I escaped because they wanted me to. Because it was more interesting that way. So listen carefully. Carry iron. Never give your name. And if you hear a howl in the night, don't wait for the second one. Story 7. I'm 24 now. Old enough that I stopped believing in monsters a long time ago. I don't check under my bed. I don't get scared of shadows. And I don't usually let my imagination run wild like I did when I was a kid. But there's one memory that never left me. It's been stuck in my head for years, like something small and sharp you can't pull out. I've tried to explain it away, tried to tell myself it was just a dream or something my mind made up. But every time I think about it, that same feeling comes back. That deep, instinctive fear. The kind that doesn't feel imagined. I was 10 years old when it happened. My parents had sent me to a summer camp somewhere deep in the woods. It wasn't anything special. Just a normal place with cabins, a dining hall, and a big open yard where we spent most of our time. The days were fun. We ran around, played games, stayed outside until it got dark. Nothing about it felt strange or unusual. It happened on the 4th night. We had just finished a long day, and after lights out, everyone went back to their cabins. I had a bed right next to the window. Normally, I would fall asleep pretty quickly after a day like that, but that night was different. The mosquitoes were everywhere. The air inside the cabin felt thick and warm, and I could hear that constant buzzing near my ears. Every time I closed my eyes, one would come too close, and I'd have to swat at it again. After a while, I got so bored and annoyed that I started doing something weird just to pass the time. Every time I killed one, I placed it on the windowsill next to me. One by one, I lined them up. A neat little row of dead insects. It sounds strange now, but at the time it gave me something to focus on, something to do until I finally felt tired enough to sleep. Eventually, I lay back down and closed my eyes. And at some point, I drifted off. I don't know how much time passed before I woke up again. But it wasn't a normal kind of waking up. There was no slow moment where I opened my eyes and adjusted to the dark. I was suddenly awake, completely alert, like something had forced me out of sleep. And the first thing I felt was fear. Not the kind of fear you get from a bad dream or a loud noise. This was different. It felt heavy, suffocating, like something invisible was pressing down on my chest. A cold sensation ran through my body, starting at the back of my neck and spreading down my spine. The room was completely silent, too silent. All the other kids were still asleep. I could hear their slow breathing, soft and steady. Nothing seemed out of place, except for the feeling. I turned my head slowly toward the window, and that's when I saw it. Outside, everything had changed. The camp yard was gone, or at least I couldn't see it anymore. It was covered in thick fog. Not the kind you usually see drifting through in the morning. This was heavier, denser. It swallowed everything. You couldn't see past a few feet. And inside that fog, something was moving. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I blinked a few times trying to focus, but it was still there. Something was moving across the yard. It looked like a person, but not fully solid. More like a shape, a silhouette, wrapped in something that flowed behind it like a long cloak. And then I noticed the color. It wasn't dark like a shadow. It was glowing. A strange, unnatural green, bright enough to stand out against the fog, but not in a normal way. It didn't light up the surroundings. It just existed, like it carried its own color with it. I couldn't look away. The way it moved didn't make sense. It didn't run like a person. Its feet didn't seem to touch the ground properly. It moved too smoothly, too fast, like it was gliding instead of stepping. It crossed the yard in seconds. Then it reached the fence. That fence was tall enough that none of us kids could climb it easily during the day. But whatever that thing was, it didn't even slow down. It lifted, or jumped, or something. I still don't know how to describe it. It cleared the fence like it wasn't even there. I just lay there staring. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. It didn't fit into anything I understood. For a few seconds, I was completely frozen. Then something strange happened. It felt like my brain just gave up, like it refused to deal with what I'd just seen. Instead of panicking or screaming, I simply lay back down. My body relaxed, and I fell asleep. Just like that. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. There was a weight in my chest, a kind of heaviness that didn't go away no matter how much I tried to ignore it. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something else. Something closer to the feeling you get when you realize you've seen something you weren't meant to see. I don't remember telling anyone about it. Maybe I thought they wouldn't believe me. Or maybe I didn't want to say it out loud because saying it would make it real. But I never forgot it. Even now I can still see it clearly. That shape, that movement, that green glow cutting through the fog. And even after all these years, one thing hasn't changed. Whenever I see thick fog outside my window at night, I don't watch it. I close the curtains. Story 8. I'm about to go back into a cave that feels like it's filled with the voices of the dead. Even after everything that's happened, the strangest thing on my mind is still something small and personal. I keep thinking about how I was right and how my friend is going to hate that. I know it sounds stupid compared to everything else, but that's the truth. I'm writing all of this partly because of that, but mostly because people need to know what I found. This isn't just for me anymore. I'll call myself B. I'm a university student studying audio engineering. Nothing about my life before that was unusual. I liked music, technology, and messing around with sound equipment. I wasn't obsessed with the supernatural. That was more my friend's thing. She loved anything mysterious or unexplained. Books, documentaries, weird theories. She was into all of it. I always thought it was entertaining, but not real. She's the reason I'm here. She found the cave first, or at least she heard something near it. She called me while she was still climbing down a hill, out of breath and clearly excited. I could hear gravel shifting under her feet and the strain in her voice. She begged me to go check it out for her. That alone was enough to make me take it seriously. She never begged for anything. So I grabbed some basic supplies, my audio recorder, and my laptop, and I headed out. The area is near some mountains not far from the university. There used to be hiking trails there, but now most of the land belongs to a mining company. People still go near it sometimes, but not as often as before. There are stories about the place, too. Old ones. Things about workers dying in strange ways. I never paid attention to them. I reached the area at night. The landscape looked almost unreal in the moonlight. Rolling hills, long grass moving gently in the wind, and scattered trees casting thin shadows. It was quiet in a way that made every small sound feel important. The moment I stepped onto the grass, I heard something. It was faint, like someone coughing right next to me. It startled me so badly that I dropped my phone. My heart started racing immediately. I paused my music and listened carefully, turning in slow circles to see if anyone else was there. Nothing. Just the same empty hills and trees. I told myself it was nothing, but I still pulled out my audio recorder and replayed the last few seconds. That's when everything changed. There were voices on the recording, not clear voices, but sounds, wet, strained, painful sounds. It was like a group of people trying to speak, but barely having the strength to do it. Some of them sounded like they were crying. Others sounded like they were choking or struggling to breathe. There were a lot of them. It didn't sound like one person. It sounded like many. I should have left right then. Instead, I felt something else. Fear, yes, but also curiosity. A strong pull to understand what I was hearing. It didn't feel like imagination anymore. It felt real. I started moving toward the cave. When I reached the entrance, I heard something again. This time, it was even quieter, almost like a whisper at the edge of my hearing. I dropped down and listened to the recording again. More voices, more coughing, more pain, and something else. A scratching sound. At first, I didn't understand it, but after listening carefully, it sounded like fingernails dragging against something soft. Not stone, not dirt, something else. Then I heard a word. Death. It wasn't perfectly clear, but it was close enough that I couldn't ignore it. I backed away from the cave for a moment and ran down the hill to test something. When I got far enough away, I heard the sound again. The same faint whisper. And when I checked the recording, it matched. That's when I realized something. The sounds weren't happening in real time. They were repeating, like echoes. Not normal echoes. These weren't bouncing sounds. These were full moments, voices, movements, even emotions, replaying in the same place over and over again. It felt like the cave was holding on to something. That idea should have made me leave. Instead, it made me go back. I called my friend and told her everything. She was excited, even though she told me to wait for her before going inside. She wanted to come back with others to explore it together safely. I said I would wait. I didn't. I went in. The inside of the cave was strange. It sloped downward in a smooth, almost unnatural way. It didn't feel like climbing. It felt like walking down a path that had been made intentionally. I moved slowly, using a lighter to check the air. I had read that if the flame went out, it could mean dangerous gas. That was my only safety plan. Not far in, I heard another whisper. I checked the recording. This time the voices were clearer. Someone was coughing hard. Another voice kept repeating the same words over and over. I'm so sorry. Hearing that changed something in me. It made everything feel more real, more human. Whatever happened here wasn't just strange. It was terrible. I kept going. The cave narrowed more and more until I had to turn sideways to move. Eventually, it led to a small crawl space, a tight opening in the rock. That's when I heard it, a scream. Not on the recording, not faint, right in front of me. "Get out of the way!" I dropped the lighter. The darkness hit instantly. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The cave felt like it was closing in around me. My hands scraped against the ground as I searched for the lighter. My mind filled with images of something being right there in that hole, watching me, waiting. When I finally found the lighter and lit it again, the crawl space was empty. There was nothing there. I didn't stay. I backed out of the cave as fast as I could, whispering to myself, telling myself it was over, that I had seen enough. But I still had the recording, and I listened to it. It started with the scream, then voices, a man yelling, a woman begging, panic building between them. They were stuck. Someone was blocking the crawl space. The air must have been bad. They were coughing, choking, getting weaker. Then someone said something that made my stomach drop. "Cut him." At first I thought I misheard it, but then the man started screaming, begging. They were cutting him, trying to get past him. The screams went on until they stopped, just like that. Silence. I sat there for a long time after hearing that. My hands were shaking. My body felt cold, even though I wasn't inside the cave anymore. I told myself I was done. I started heading back down the hill. Then I got a message from my friend. She told me she had sent others to the cave and warned me not to let them go inside. That should have been enough to make me leave. It wasn't. Because now I know what's in there. Not ghosts, not creatures, something worse. Moments that don't end, voices that don't fade, pain that keeps repeating. And I can't stop thinking about what's deeper inside. If those were just echoes near the entrance, what's waiting at the bottom? Story 9. I don't remember falling asleep. I only remember that at some point my eyes opened, and it was there. It didn't have a real shape. It was like a mass that moved without breathing, like something alive but not truly alive. It shifted slowly, forming faces that never fully became faces. They appeared and melted away like wax under heat. Some shapes looked almost human, like hints of cheeks or teeth, or the outline of eyes, but they never stayed long enough to be complete. It reminded me of something that was trying to become real but couldn't quite manage it. It moved in a smooth, flowing way, like water spreading across the surface. It would stretch out, then pull itself back together as if it was constantly trying again. There was no sound, no sudden movement. Everything about it was quiet, controlled and strange in a way that didn't feel natural. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. My breathing became shallow and my heart started beating faster. It wasn't panic exactly. It felt deeper than that. Something instinctive. Like my body understood I was looking at something I was never supposed to see. But I couldn't look away. There was fear, but there was also curiosity. Both feelings pulled at me at the same time. Part of me wanted to shut my eyes and turn away, but another part of me needed to keep watching. I wanted to understand what I was seeing, even if it didn't make sense. So I kept looking. I watched every small movement, every ripple across its surface. I focused on the shapes that formed and disappeared. Some stayed longer than others, just long enough to feel intentional. At one point, I saw what looked like two small eyes. They were faint, distant, almost like tiny stars in darkness. They blinked once before fading away. Another time I saw a part of a smile. Not a full face, just a curved shape that suggested one, paired with empty spaces that felt like holes in reality. There was also something else, a feeling. At one moment, I was sure it was sad. It didn't have a face to show emotion, but somehow I understood it. Or maybe I just believed I did. Then something changed. It didn't speak, not in any way I could hear. There was no voice, no sound at all. But suddenly, I understood something about it. It was like the idea of it entered my mind all at once. I knew what it was. It wasn't a creature in the normal sense. It wasn't something from the outside world. It felt like something created by thought itself. Something that existed because the mind exists. Like it came from the same place dreams come from. But it wasn't truly alive. It didn't have a purpose. It didn't have a goal or desire like a person would. It just existed for that moment. And it knew that it wouldn't last. It knew it was temporary. And then, without words, it asked me something. I didn't hear a question, but I understood it anyway. Are you afraid? I answered without thinking, yes. Then came another question, just as silent, just as clear. Why don't you look away? That one made me pause. For a brief moment, everything felt still. My thoughts slowed down, and I searched for an answer that made sense. But the only thing that came to me was simple. Because I'm human. There was no reaction in the way we usually expect. No expression or change in tone. But I felt something like acknowledgement. It understood. Not in a deep or emotional way, just in a simple, factual way. Like recognizing something that was already known. It didn't seem to care about being understood. It only seemed to care about being seen. That realization settled into me quietly. I wasn't there to figure it out or give it meaning. I was just there to witness it. As I kept watching, something else became clear. It was changing. The movement started to slow down. The shapes became less frequent. The constant shifting that defined it began to fade. And somehow I felt like it didn't want that. It's hard to explain. It didn't express fear or resistance, but there was a sense that it was aware of what was happening, like it understood that its time was ending. I spoke out loud then, even though the words felt strange in my mouth. It will be okay, I said quietly. We have to die too. I don't know why I said that. It just felt like the right thing to say in that moment. There was no direct response. Instead, it simply continued to fade. The movement slowed even more, becoming softer and less defined. The shapes stopped forming. The faces that had almost existed disappeared completely. It didn't end suddenly. There was no struggle, no sudden collapse. It just became less, gradually, gently, like something drifting away. As it faded, I felt something that I couldn't fully explain. My mind tried to fill the emptiness it left behind with emotions. Maybe it was sadness. Maybe it was relief. Maybe something like completion. I don't know for sure. The last traces of it shrank into the edges of my vision. The darkness around it broke apart, replaced by the faint light of the room. The shifting stopped entirely. And then it was gone. There was nothing left. Just silence. Just the faint ringing in my ears. But even now, I can't shake one thought. If it had any kind of desire at all, I think it was this: to be remembered. Not understood, not explained, just remembered. the same way we want to be remembered after we're gone. Story 10, Reed had attached a black and white photograph to his email. In the picture, there was a man standing on a stage inside what looked like a circus tent. But this was no ordinary man. He was impossibly tall, painfully thin, and from his back extended large, feathered wings. Around him stood a crowd of people, and even through the old photograph, you could feel their fear. I examined the image carefully, looking for any signs that it had been edited or manipulated. I checked shadows, proportions, grain patterns, everything I usually relied on. But nothing looked fake. If it was a fabrication, it was a perfect one. The man in the photograph was chained to the stage floor. His body looked starved, his ribs pressing sharply against his skin as if he hadn't eaten in weeks. This man disappeared in 1922, Reed had written in his email. I need your help finding out what happened to him. Reed was not an ordinary client. He was a billionaire, someone who had made his fortune in cloud data systems. Recently, though, he had been in the news for a different reason. He had been diagnosed with terminal liver cancer. When I first read his message, I couldn't help but wonder if desperation had started to affect his judgment. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I called the number in his email signature. His secretary answered in a calm, professional tone and scheduled a meeting for later that week. When I arrived at his office downtown, I immediately noticed how much his illness had taken from him. He sat behind a large desk, but as I entered, he stood up to greet me. He was thin, almost fragile looking. His head was completely bald, and his skin had that pale, sickly tone you only see in people fighting something they know they can't win. But when he shook my hand, his grip was firm, and he smiled with the confidence of someone used to being in control. The famous Red Primara, he said. I go by Vadim now, I replied. He studied me for a moment, clearly curious. How did they catch you? I've always wanted to know. The FBI planted a canary token inside a server I hacked. When I activated it, it exposed my IP address. Did they know you were coming? I've always believed they did, I said. But I never figured out who tipped them off. My partner, Alexei, served 2 years. I did 15. After that, I decided to stay on the legal side of things. Reed coughed into a handkerchief, then sat back down and turned his monitor toward me. On the screen was an old newspaper article, dated October 1922. It described a traveling circus called Marchetti's Palace of Wonders. Among the performers, a sword swallower, a strong man, and a fortune teller. There was one name that stood out, Chazakiel. The man in the photograph, Reed said, called himself Chazakiel. The circus owner claimed he was one of the watchers from an ancient religious text. I frowned. What does that mean? It comes from the Book of Enoch, Reed explained. According to it, certain angels abandoned heaven and came to earth. They took human wives, and their children became something else entirely. Giants, monstrous beings called Nephilim. He scrolled through the article, stopping again at the image of the winged man. Chazakiel became famous, Reed continued. Stories about him spread across the country. Eventually, they reached a railroad tycoon named Threll. He was deeply interested in the occult and believed he could use supernatural forces to influence reality itself. I leaned closer to the screen. Threll sent a Pinkerton detective to investigate, Reed said. The detective arrived in North Dakota and vanished. More agents were sent, but none of them found him. What they did find was that Chezakiel had also disappeared. And no one ever figured out what happened? I asked. Reed smiled faintly. That's where it gets even stranger. He opened another image. This one was much more recent, though still old. It looked like it had been taken sometime in the late 20th century. The same man, Chezakiel, lay on a metal table in what looked like a laboratory. His head had been shaved. His wings were mutilated, stripped of feathers. His body was covered in surgical scars. I had seen disturbing things before, the kind of things most people would never forget. But this was different. Something about it felt wrong on a deeper level. This image was posted online in the late 1980s, Reed said. The person who uploaded it claimed they worked for a company called Parallax. It was founded by Threll's grandson. You think they've been keeping him alive all this time? I asked. Reed leaned forward slightly. Threll's grandson had lung cancer, he said. Severe, but somehow he recovered. Not only that, people say he stopped aging. That was the moment I should have walked away. Everything about the story sounded impossible. But work had been slow, and Reed was offering more money than most people would ever see in a lifetime. So I agreed to investigate. For the next few days, I searched through old forums, archived message boards, and hidden corners of the internet. Eventually, I found a lead, someone who claimed to have posted the original image decades ago. They went by the name Null Sequence. I sent an email, not expecting a reply. 2 weeks later, I got one. They invited me to join a secure chat. I accepted. After verifying my identity, I spoke to a woman. She told me her father had been Null Sequence. He had worked for Parallax until his death in 1992. The official cause was a heroin overdose, but she didn't believe it. He never touched drugs, she said. Not even painkillers. She told me about Project Nephilim. The company had been studying the angel's DNA, trying to uncover secrets about human existence itself. Her father had kept a journal. In it, he described experiments, blood extraction, genetic analysis, and something darker. In his final entry, he wrote that the man in charge believed the angel wanted revenge. That was enough for Reed. He wanted me inside the lab. The building was in New Mexico. It had been abandoned for years. I arranged a visit. The place looked ordinary from the outside, but inside, it felt wrong. Empty cubicles, silent hallways, and a strange heaviness in the air. In the basement, I found a locked metal door. When I touched it, it felt warm. For a moment, I lost my balance and saw something that wasn't there. A circus, a cage, the winged man speaking to someone in the dark. Then it was gone. That night, I returned with tools. It took time, but eventually I forced the door open. Behind it, there was another staircase leading down. The deeper I went, the colder it became. At the bottom, I found a hidden lab. It was in ruins. Broken equipment, scattered instruments, dried stains that told stories I didn't want to understand. Then I heard something. A faint sound, like someone breathing. I followed it into another room. At first, I only saw a shadow on the wall. Then I raised my flashlight and saw him, Chezakiel. He was pinned to the wall with steel bolts, his arms stretched wide. Wires ran into his body, connecting him to machines that no longer worked. His wings were barely recognizable. He lifted his head slowly and looked at me. "You found me," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. I asked if he was in pain. "I've known worse," he replied. "Will you free me?" I hesitated. Something about him felt dangerous. But then he spoke again. "I can tell you who betrayed you." That caught my attention. He spoke the name I had always suspected. Alexei. The truth hit me harder than I expected. All those years, all those questions, it had been him. Without thinking, I picked up the bolt cutters and freed him. The wires snapped as he stepped forward. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then he grabbed me. Before I could react, his mouth opened impossibly wide, and everything went dark. Pain followed. It felt like my body was being torn apart and rebuilt at the same time. My blood burned. My bones shifted. I screamed, but nothing stopped it. I don't know how long it lasted. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor. Something had changed. And it didn't take long to realize what. At first, it was small things, aches, hunger, fatigue. But then my body started changing, growing, stretching. I couldn't eat normal food anymore, only raw meat. Then the wings started to grow. By the time I saw Reed again on television, he looked completely healed, strong, alive. He talked about a new company, about unlocking human potential. I stood in my bathroom and looked at myself. I barely recognized what I had become, and for the first time, I understood the truth. Chezakiel hadn't just been a victim. He had been waiting. Story 11. That smell stays with you. It never really leaves. Burnt flesh has a strange sweetness to it, something sick and heavy that clings to the air, especially in the heat of summer. This all happened in late July 2011. I had taken a job clearing out a stretch of swampy land in a nearby town. It didn't seem like anything unusual at the time. Clearing land is what I've done for most of my life. But looking back now, I wish the company that hired us had been more honest about what we were walking into. They had to know something. There's no way they didn't. The plan was simple. We would clear the land, and once we were done, it would be leveled and turned into a shopping center. Just another piece of nature replaced by concrete and steel. The swamp had already been drained, but not completely. Thick, muddy water still filled low areas, turning the ground into a maze of soft traps hidden under moss and tangled roots. Old trees stood everywhere, their branches twisted and heavy with age. My crew, 12 men in total, took one look at the place and knew it was going to be a rough job. The first few hours went about as well as they could. I've been working with heavy machinery for over 20 years, and I've spent half of that time leading crews like this. Mud in your boots, branches tearing at your gloves. That's just part of the work. It's never easy, but it's familiar. Cutting down cypress trees, though, is always difficult. Those things are stubborn. My crew struggled with them all day, trying to bring down trees that had probably been standing there for hundreds of years. At the time, that felt like the worst part of the job. Now I'd take that over what came later without thinking twice. I was going over our plan with Dan, my most trusted guy, when we heard a loud crack. One of the trees came down at a bad angle, nearly crushing a machine and the man inside it. Luckily, it only clipped the front before crashing into a muddy pool, sending dirty water everywhere. I looked around and quickly figured out who had made the mistake. Cam, the new kid. He couldn't have been more than 20. He was eager and always trying his best, but he didn't have much experience. I had hired him because he reminded me a little of myself when I was younger. I never told him that, though. Now he just stood there, frozen, staring at the fallen tree like he couldn't understand what had gone wrong. I walked over, angry. "Are you trying to get someone killed?" I snapped. "I don't understand," he said, his voice shaking. "I followed the steps. Not well enough," I cut him off. "You almost crushed someone. This isn't a game." He looked down, kicking at the dirt. "Sorry, sir." I was about to keep going, but I stopped myself. It had already been a long day, and this was his first real mistake. I gave him a warning instead, and let him go back to work. As he turned, I noticed something on his back. A large spider, black and yellow with long, thin legs. It looked strange, not like anything I'd seen before. I brushed it off, and it hung in the air in a thin thread before climbing back up into the trees. "Spider," I told him when he looked back at me. He laughed nervously and walked off. By evening, we had made good progress. The sky turned a deep orange as the sun went down and the crew started packing up. Machines shut down one by one, and the noise faded into the sound of insects and distant birds. Dan came over with the map. There was one tree we hadn't dealt with yet, a massive bald cypress near the edge of the site. We decided to leave it for the next day. One by one, the crew headed home, until it was just me and Dan left. The place felt different with everyone gone. Quiet. Too quiet. We walked over to the big tree to mark it. It was huge, far bigger than the others. Its roots spread out like thick arms gripping the earth. It felt stubborn, alive in a way the others weren't. Dan kicked it, but it didn't move at all. I took off my glove and touched the bark. It was cool and damp. Then I felt a sharp sting on my neck. I slapped at it and saw another one of those spiders, bigger this time. It crawled across my hand, its body almost filling my palm. For a moment, I just stared at it. It was ugly, but there was something strange about it too, something almost fascinating. Dan knocked it off and crushed it under his boot. "Better off dead," he said. Something about that made me feel uneasy. By the time we started walking back, it was almost completely dark. We turned on our flashlights and followed the path through the trees. After a few minutes, Dan suddenly tripped and fell. When we looked down, we saw what had caught him. A thick white strand stretched across the path like a rope. It looked wrong. Not like normal rope. It was slightly shiny, almost glowing in the light. We stepped over it and kept walking, but something didn't feel right anymore. The path seemed longer than it should have been. I started to wonder if we were lost. Then we heard it. A horrible sound, like an animal choking. We followed the noise and found a deer hanging in the air, caught in the same kind of strand. It was still alive, struggling. I went to cut it down, but Dan tried to stop me. "It's suffering," I said, and ignored him. I grabbed the strand and started cutting, but it wouldn't break. Then Dan screamed. I turned just in time to see him get pulled off the ground and dragged into the trees. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone. I froze. Then I felt pain in my hand. The strand I was holding had stuck to my skin. When I pulled away, it tore flesh from my palm. I didn't care. I ran to where Dan had been taken and shined my light upward. He was hanging there, wrapped in that same material. I tried to pull him down, but the strands held tight. Then I noticed something above him. Movement. Something big. It started coming down toward us. At first I thought it was just a shadow, but then I saw its shape. A human face, pale, smiling. But everything about it was wrong. Before I could react, we were both pulled up into the trees. After that, things get blurry. When I came to, I was surrounded by thick webs covering everything. Bodies hung all around me. Then I saw it. The creature. It looked like a woman from the waist up, but below that was the body of a massive spider. It was feeding. Not biting, not tearing, draining, like it was sucking the life out of its victim. When it finished, it wrapped the body and tossed it aside. I saw my crew, all of them, hanging there, dead. I knew I was next. Creature came closer. I couldn't move. Something in the web had paralyzed me. I tried to speak to it. I don't know why. It answered. Not with words, but with a feeling in my head. It said it had been taken from somewhere else. That we were destroying its home again. For a moment, I felt its pain. Then I smelled smoke. The web caught fire. Dan had somehow woken up and used his lighter. The flames spread fast. The creature screamed. Dan shouted at me to run. Then it killed him. The fire burned through the web holding me, and I fell. I hit the ground hard, but managed to get up and run. I didn't stop until I reached my truck at sunrise. Dan's truck was still there. Empty. I sat there for a long time. Then I took a beer from my cooler and left it in the back of his truck. It felt like the right thing to do. Then I drove away. I never went back. Story 12. I didn't plan on staying long when I took the job. That matters, because I wasn't someone looking for something strange or exciting, or anything worth telling a story about later. I just needed something temporary, something steady enough to cover rent without too many questions. When I found the listing for ride operators at Black Ridge Park, it sounded perfect. It said the place had new management and had just reopened, describing itself as a revitalized classic horror experience. That sounded like it would be busy enough to keep me occupied, but still quiet enough that no one would care if I didn't act overly cheerful all the time. The park had been closed for years before reopening, long enough that people in town talked about it like it was already gone, like it belonged to the past instead of the present. When it finally opened again, there wasn't much excitement. Just a few local ads and a website that didn't even work properly. It wasn't polished, it didn't feel modern, but it was open, and they were hiring. My first day didn't really feel like training. It felt more like someone walking me through what still worked and what didn't. My supervisor, Mark, had a tired kind of voice, like he was always finishing a conversation he didn't want to have. Just so you know, he said as we passed a row of closed food stands, things break down a lot, especially the indoor rides. If something stops, don't panic. You grab a flashlight, walk the track, and guide the guests out. That's it? I asked. That's it, he said. Then he added, and don't improvise. Stick to the path. If something looks off, it's probably just old equipment. Probably. That word stuck with me. The ride I was assigned to was called Grave Passage. It was one of those slow-moving dark rides where people sit in small cars that move along a track through different horror scenes. Fake graves, moving figures, glowing paint under black light. It was old in a way that almost felt charming at first. You could see where things weren't perfect if you looked closely. It didn't try too hard to feel real. Most people wrote it because the line was short or because it was hidden far enough into the park that it felt like something you found instead of something being advertised. It broke down 3 times on my first day. The first time I thought I had done something wrong. The cars slowed and stopped somewhere inside. The sound cut out suddenly, leaving everything quiet in a way that didn't feel right. Then the radio on my belt came to life. "Grave passage, confirm stop," Mark said. "Yeah," I replied. It just stopped. "All right, you know what to do. Flashlight, track walk, get them out." I grabbed the flashlight and stepped inside. Right away, the place felt different. From the outside, it was just sounds and shadows. But inside, when everything was still, it felt like you weren't supposed to be there. The walls looked flatter, the props less convincing, and the silence felt heavier. I found the first car easily. A couple was sitting inside, leaning forward like they were trying to see ahead. "Sorry about this," I said. "We've got to stop. I need you to step out and follow me." "Is this part of the ride?" the woman asked, half joking. "No," I said. "Just a problem?" They followed me out, and that was it. The second time I wasn't as nervous. It already felt familiar. I didn't hesitate, just went inside and did the same thing again. The third time was when something felt different. The ride had stopped further inside in a darker section where there weren't many props. Those areas always felt unfinished, like they weren't meant to be noticed. But this time, it felt darker than before. Not by much, just enough. I walked slower, letting the flashlight move across the walls. The paint looked older. Some parts of the set were clearly fake, wood showing behind panels, wires running along edges. Then I noticed a door. It was slightly open. I was sure it hadn't been earlier. I stood there for a moment, trying to remember. Maybe I had just missed it. Maybe it didn't matter. Still, I stepped forward and pushed it closed. The radio crackled. "Everything all right?" Mark asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just moving through." "Don't take too long." "I'm not." But I was. Not in an obvious way, just small pauses. Letting the light stay in one place longer than needed. It wasn't fear. It was something else. Like I was starting to pay attention. I got the guests out and started walking back. Then I heard it. A step. Soft, but clear. I stopped. The couple behind me almost bumped into me. "Part of the ride?" the man asked. I turned the flashlight back. Nothing. Just the same empty track. "No," I said. "Probably just a building." We kept walking. I didn't hear it again. Later, I mentioned it to Mark. He didn't care. "You'll hear things," he said. "Sound travel's weird. Could be anything." That should have been enough, but it wasn't. Because the next time it happened, the sound came from ahead. After that, it kept happening. Every time I walked the track, there would be a moment where everything felt normal. Then I'd hear footsteps, always ahead of me, always just out of reach. I tried to catch up once. I walked faster, then faster still. The footsteps stayed the same distance away, perfectly timed. Then they stopped, just like that. The silence afterward felt worse. I found the guests like nothing had happened. But something had. I started asking around. One of the other operators, Lila, had been there longer than anyone else. When I asked her about it, she didn't seem surprised. "Yeah," she said. "That's it?" I asked. That's it. I asked if she was curious. I was, she said, at first. And now? She looked at me for a moment. Don't try to catch it, she said. I told her I already had. She went quiet, then said, yeah, it does that. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Because it didn't stay at the park. At first, it was small things at home. Doors slightly open, objects not where I left them, easy to ignore. Then one night I heard it. A creak in the hallway. I froze. Then I stepped forward. The floor creaked again. Not where I stepped. Further ahead, like something had moved away from me. After that, I couldn't ignore it anymore. At work, I almost told Lila, but before I could, I felt something near my ear, not touching, just close. Then I heard a voice, soft, barely there. Wait. I jumped back, my heart racing. No one else reacted. No one else heard it. I said it was nothing, but it wasn't. After that, everything changed. At work, at home, everywhere. Things felt used. Like something was always just out of sight. I stopped trying to find it. It didn't matter. It was never there when I looked, only when I didn't. The last time I heard it clearly, I was at home, sitting still, trying not to react, trying not to give it anything. I sat there for a long time. Then I heard it. Right behind me, clear, calm. That's not how you do it. I haven't gone back to the park since. I haven't tried to explain any of this. There's no way to explain it without it sounding wrong, so I don't try. I just stay here. I don't move too much. I don't react. I don't turn around. I don't acknowledge it because I don't think it's following me anymore. I don't think it needs to. I think it's already here. Story 13. When I was a kid, I used to wait all week for my mom's payday. That was the one night everything felt right. She would take all of us out to eat, and we always went to the same place. The fast food spot with the big golden arches. Back then, it actually looked cheerful. Almost like a colorful barn with a bright red roof. And that sign, it stood tall and glowing like something special. It felt important just being near it. At the entrance, there was a plastic statue of the clown. It looked friendly at first, but if you stared too long, its eyes felt empty. Still, I loved it. It meant we were about to eat. I always ordered the same thing. A double cheeseburger meal and a chocolate milkshake. We went there so often that one of the workers, a woman with red hair and freckles, knew us by name. We would sit in the same booth every time, and she would bring our food without even asking much. My dad would make stupid jokes to her, the kind that made my mom glare at him while the waitress laughed awkwardly. Then we would eat. And it always tasted amazing. The fries were salty and crispy, the burgers thin but juicy. The onions melted in your mouth, and the cheese stuck to the roof of your mouth in the best way. I would eat everything slowly at first, then faster, like I didn't want it to end but couldn't stop myself. Then I'd wipe my hands on a greasy napkin and drink my milkshake. It barely tasted like milk, more like thick chocolate, but I loved it anyway. Those nights were the only time we felt like a real family. As I got older, school never really worked out for me. I barely passed most classes. College wasn't even something I thought about. Honestly, I didn't care. There was only one place I ever wanted to work. The interview went smoothly. The manager was a heavy man in a tight uniform, sweating constantly. His face had marks on it, like old burns or sores. The kitchen was hot, almost unbearable, but I didn't mind. It felt familiar. He showed me around and told me I'd start at the fryer. I remember watching another worker drop baskets into the hot oil. The sound of it, the loud sizzling, hit me in a way I can't really explain. It felt good, comforting even. Training was boring, old videos about safety and cleaning. At the end of each one, the clown would appear, smiling too wide, saying the same strange line about teamwork. The videos looked old, faded, like they had been used for years without being updated. My first day went well. The manager said I was a natural at the fryer. I believed him. I loved the sound of the oil, that constant sizzling. It made everything else fade away. They moved me around after that, cleaning, working the register. But I always came back to the fryer. I didn't care about anything else. That sound, that heat. It made everything feel right. The other workers were polite, but I could tell they didn't like me much. I think they were jealous. I was better at the fryer than any of them. There was one worker I recognized. The red-haired waitress from when I was a kid. She was older now, her hair faded with gray. She recognized me too. She asked about my family. I told her she probably knew more than I did. She didn't say anything after that. After that day, she kept her distance. I caught her whispering to others sometimes, saying I was slow, that I didn't understand things. But I knew the truth. They were jealous. Then came the day everything changed. It started like any other. I sat in my car, looking at the golden arches. They weren't as bright as they used to be. The building itself had changed too, turned into a plain gray box. The statue of the clown was gone. That always bothered me. I clocked in and started working. People were whispering, laughing quietly, but I ignored it. Then the manager called me into his office. He looked worse than usual, sweating more, nervous. He handed me a paper. It was covered in grease, hard to read. "The others think you're being fired," he said. "But that's not true." My heart still skipped. "What's going on?" I asked. He smiled. "You're getting promoted," he said. "Assistant manager." I couldn't believe it. Then I remembered someone else. "What about Mindy?" I asked. "She's being let go," he said. "Actually, everyone is, except you and me." That didn't make sense. I looked at the paper again. I could barely read it, but I saw strange words. Something about agreements. Something about consequences. He checked his watch. "They'll be here soon," he said. "When they arrive, the doors will lock. Just stay calm. Keep working. Don't look them in the eyes." That part stuck with me. I went back to my station and kept working. Then the front doors opened. I didn't look at first. I just kept frying. But I heard people react. Nervous laughter. Confusion. Then I looked. There were 4 of them. They didn't look right. One was huge and purple, its skin swollen and covered in sores. Another looked like a man in a suit, but his head was shaped like a rotten burger. One looked almost human, but dirty, covered in stains. And then there was the clown. He looked perfect. Too perfect. Like something carved, not alive. I looked away quickly. Things started to fall apart after that. One of the workers tried to run. The doors were locked. The manager dragged Mindy into the office. The others started moving through the kitchen. People screamed. I didn't turn around. I just kept frying. The sounds behind me were wrong, wet, heavy, like something being torn apart. People shouting, begging. I ignored it. I focused on the fryer, the sound of the oil, that steady, familiar noise. After a while, everything went quiet. Someone came up behind me. I felt a hand on my shoulder. "You're good at that," a voice said. Another voice said, "Good job?" I felt proud. Then the clown came closer. He spoke softly. "You'll do anything for this company?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Put your hand in the oil," he said. I hesitated for a second, then I did it. The pain was unbearable at first. Then it faded into something else. Numb, but still there. I watched my skin burn. I didn't pull away. When I finally took my hand out, it was ruined. The manager wrapped it up. He told me I did a good job. He also said he was sorry. After that day, everything changed. I became assistant manager. My hand never healed properly. It curled up, useless. New workers came in. They avoided looking at it. I didn't care. I kept things running the way they should be. The clown hasn't come back yet, but I know he will. He told me if I keep doing well, I'll be in charge soon. The manager seems nervous now. I think he knows what's coming. Sometimes I dream about it. About what happens next? I think I understand now. Everyone gets replaced eventually. And when my time comes, I think I'll be ready. I love this job. It gave me everything. And all it cost me was everything I had. Every time I hear that fryer, that perfect sizzling sound, I know it was worth it. Story 14. My friend told me I should share this after hearing what happened to me, so I'll just say it as clearly as I can. About 2 or 3 years ago, I was driving through the Appalachian Mountains. I had come up from Savannah, and honestly, I didn't need much of a reason to go there. The mountains always made me feel like I belonged somewhere. It's hard to explain, but whenever I was there, I felt calm in a way I never did anywhere else. It felt more like home than any place I had actually lived. That time, though, I wasn't there just for the feeling. I had just finished dealing with something at work that completely turned my life upside down. I used to work at a large defense contractor. I won't name which one, but it was one of the big ones. The kind that deals with things most people never hear about. One day, something went very wrong. A document was leaked to the public, something that absolutely should not have been seen outside the company. It wasn't even my mistake, but I was the one pulled in to deal with the fallout. I sat in a room for hours, maybe days, being questioned by 2 men from the Department of Defense. They didn't shout, but they didn't need to. The way they spoke, the way they looked at me, it felt like I was being slowly crushed. By the time it was over, I was fired. Just like that. No second chances. No sympathy. I went back to my desk, packed up my things, and tried not to think too much about what had just happened. Before I left, I stopped in the common area and poured myself a glass of water from a pitcher. I remember taking a sip and pausing. It tasted off. Not terrible, just wrong somehow. I couldn't explain it, so I ignored it and finished the glass. I didn't really have anyone to call or anywhere specific to go, so I did the only thing that made sense to me at the time. I got in my car and left. Driving has always had a strange effect on me. When you're on the road long enough, it starts to feel like the rest of the world is moving away from you. Like everything you knew is slipping behind you, and you're entering something new, something separate. It becomes just you and your thoughts, nothing else. By the time I reached the beginning of the mountain range, The sky was turning that deep purple color you only see at sunset. It was peaceful in a way that almost felt unreal. During the day, sunlight can feel overwhelming, like it's pushing into everything you do. But in those hours between evening and night, it softens. The sky fills with reds, purples, and fading gold, like the world itself is finally relaxing. I kept driving as that light slowly disappeared, replaced by darkness. Eventually, it became completely black. A lot of people don't like driving at night, but I always have. There's something about it that makes everything feel distant, isolated, safe in a strange way. As I drove deeper into the mountains, the clouds began to clear and the stars came into view. They looked so close together, like they were part of the same neighborhood, even though I knew they were separated by unimaginable distances. That thought stuck with me. Everything looks connected, but really it's all alone. After a while, the number of cars on the road started to drop. The occasional headlights that had been cutting through the dark disappeared completely. It was just me now. Me and the road. I lost track of time without even realizing it. It could have been hours. The only thing that brought me back was noticing my gas gauge. It was almost empty. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. Luckily, I passed a small roadside sign that said there was a gas station 3 miles ahead. My car said I only had about a mile left. I didn't have much choice. I drove as far as I could, then pulled over when the engine started to struggle. Around that same time, my phone died, even though I hadn't been using it much. That felt strange too, but again, I ignored it. I grabbed the cash I had and started walking. The road stretched straight ahead, disappearing into darkness. During the day, it probably wouldn't have been bad, but at night, it felt completely different. When you're inside a car, even alone, you still feel protected. There's a barrier between you and everything else. Walking out there, though, there was nothing. No protection, no distance, just open space and darkness. I hated that feeling. It made me feel exposed, like anything could happen, and I wouldn't be able to stop it. Still, I kept going. I told myself that once I got the gas, I'd be back in my car, back in that small, safe space, driving through the dark again. The strangest part of that walk wasn't the silence. It was the lack of everything. No wind, no animals, no distant sounds. It felt like the world had been emptied out. Each step felt uncertain, like I was moving through something that wasn't entirely real. After what felt like much longer than 3 miles, I finally saw it. A faint glow in the distance. It looked small at first, but as I got closer, it became clearer. A gas station sitting alone in the middle of nowhere. The light coming from it felt almost unnatural, like it didn't belong there. Still, it was something solid, something real, and that was enough. The parking lot was tiny. There was only one pump standing under a small roof. I walked up to the door and grabbed the handle. It felt cold and heavy, like solid metal. I pulled it open and stepped inside. The brightness hit me immediately. After being in the dark for so long, the lights inside felt harsh, almost painful. The windows reflected the light back into the room, making it feel closed off from everything outside. Like this place was separate from the world I had just walked through. There were aisles stretching back, filled with snacks and random items. At the counter stood a man. He was much taller than me, with a thick beard that reached far down his chest. He didn't say anything. I walked up and handed him the cash. gas, please," I said quietly. He looked down at me, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he took the money and slid it out of sight behind the counter. For a moment, neither of us moved. I suddenly became very aware of how alone I was, how vulnerable. Then he turned and walked through a door behind the counter, leaving me there. The silence felt different now. He had been there, and now he wasn't. And somehow that made it worse. A strange panic started to build inside me. I felt like I had made a mistake, like I had stepped into a place I wasn't supposed to find. I turned around and looked at the aisles. They seemed longer. Not just long, but impossibly long, like they stretched far beyond the walls of the building. The farther I looked, the darker they became, until they faded into a single point of blackness. I knew something was wrong. I knew I should leave, but my body didn't listen. I took a step forward, then another. It felt like I was being pulled, like something inside me wanted to go deeper into those aisles. I reached out my hand, and as I did, it looked like it was stretching, reaching farther than it should. The shelves seemed to move away from me, extending endlessly. Still, I kept walking. Before I could stop myself, I was surrounded. The aisles closed in, stretching in every direction, and I couldn't find a way out. It felt endless, timeless, like I had stepped into something that had no beginning or end. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned sharply. The man was back. He handed me a gas can and pointed toward the door. He said something, but I couldn't hear it. My ears were ringing. I looked around again. Everything was normal. The aisles were just aisles. The store was just a store. I didn't question it. I just took the can and walked outside. The pump stood under its small roof, casting a circle of light in the darkness. I placed the can down and started filling it. The gasoline poured out quickly, the smell sharp and familiar. When it was full, I stopped and stepped back. Beyond that small circle of light, there was nothing, just darkness. I picked up the can and started walking back the way I had come. The darkness felt even heavier now. It pressed in from all sides. I kept moving, focusing straight ahead. And then slowly, something changed. The fear faded. In its place, there was something else. A feeling of complete isolation, but not in a bad way. It was what I had always thought I wanted. Total separation from everything. I stopped walking. It didn't matter if I moved or not. I felt detached from my own body, like I was no longer inside it, like I was watching from somewhere else. The darkness began to flicker. Images appeared, fast and disjointed. Insects, bees, ants, moths, butterflies, flashing over and over again, too quickly to fully see. It was like watching something broken, repeating itself endlessly. One thought kept repeating in my mind. Drawn to the light, like a good worker. Again and again. The images didn't stop. Time didn't feel real anymore. I didn't feel real. It was like everything that made me human had been stripped away, leaving only something empty behind. I don't know how long it lasted. Eventually it changed. I found myself sitting in a field. The grass was soft, almost too soft, like it wasn't real. The sky above was that same deep purple from earlier. Next to me was my mother. She looked younger than I remembered, but her hair was gray. She turned to me and spoke calmly. "You came to the light, like a good worker." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The sky shifted. The color broke apart, turning into something else. Eyes, countless eyes, all staring down at me. Everything started to flicker again. Suddenly, I could move. The light around me became overwhelming, like it was burning into my vision. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, I was somewhere else. I was standing at the edge of a cliff. I stumbled backward, my heart racing, and fell onto the ground. Below me was a steep drop, maybe 40 feet or more. I looked around, trying to understand where I was. Everything looked normal. There was a small trail leading down, so I followed it carefully until I reached the road. That's when I saw it. There had been an accident. 3 cars had collided, completely wrecked. Emergency vehicles lined the road, lights flashing. Smoke still hung in the air. One of the cars looked familiar. It was mine. A police officer saw me and told me to stay back, to return to my vehicle. I just stood there, staring. I told him that was my car. Later, I found out the other vehicles had been carrying the governor of Georgia and his family. There were no survivors. They kept me for questioning for 3 days. I told them everything, though I don't think they believed most of it. Eventually, they let me go. I live in Boone now, working as an accountant for a small tech company. Life is normal again, at least on the surface, but I still think about that night. I tried to find that gas station again. I checked maps, drove through the same roads. It doesn't exist. There isn't a gas station anywhere near where the accident happened. Not for miles. And sometimes late at night, when everything's quiet, I still remember that feeling. Not the fear, the isolation, and the way something in the darkness seemed to be waiting for me to come back.